On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Thor Clark. He is the CTO at App. We're going to be talking about his transition. He's been transitioning the org from a 30-person startup to 200, and he has sites to get to about 400. They're trying to pursue a more agile approach, and hopefully Thor will give us some insight in terms of what's been working and what's not, and kind of some of the secret sauce and how he's been scaling the company. Thor, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me today, and looking forward to talking about all the work and progress we've made at Well Health.
Absolutely. So I guess let everyone know, I mean, you're the CTO, so have an idea what responsibilities are, but let us know kind of what your purview is there. And also, what does Well Health do?
Well, I'll start with what Well Health does and just a brief overview of the business and the markets that we serve. We are focused on healthcare in the U.S. today on the provider side. So a healthcare provider is a large hospital system, for example, or an ambulatory clinic that serves patients directly. So you'll have doctors, nurses, and a wide variety of other support staff delivering care to patients. And our focus is around patient communication. We tend to focus on the enterprise market. So in the US, that's organizations that include Cedars-Sinai, Memorial Care, and a wide variety of other customers. Generally, you'll have 1,000 plus providers at one of our customers. And we provide a communication platform for those large healthcare systems where they might have millions of patients under care and a wide variety of activities that those patients are involved in with that healthcare provider, including procedures, surgeries, ambulatory visits, where it might be a same-day appointment for an urgent care clinic, or a series of appointments around a particular condition or treatment that the patient is receiving. And our platform is able to manage the full set of communication with those patients when they're outside the office. So that includes secure web messaging, SMS, email, IVR, which is automated phone calls for patients that don't want to receive the SMS or the secure web solution. And we're doing, I think, about 2 billion transactions a day, inclusive of patient messaging and other data transactions related to patient activities. So we've scaled the business quite significantly. We are best in class being a third-party ranking solution, similar to Gartner, but very specific to the healthcare industry. So we're best in class in our space. And as you mentioned, we've grown very significantly over the past 3 years from about 25 people to about 200 people today.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you're definitely probably dealing with the good problems of growth. I guess if you were to take a step back and maybe go back to the 25, 30 person startup days and trying to ship product, trying to get things going, and you're maybe reflecting back on the course of seeing now 200 plus people at the company, I guess how has process evolved, especially in terms of, like, I know you mentioned Agile is something that the company's kind of steering to, but what's been that evolution like for you guys?
Well, it's a great question. I often think of a high growth startup as just a process of constant reinvention. And just for a variety of reasons, your timelines shift, your time horizons shift as you grow, your team changes pretty dramatically in terms of level of experience and specialization. And for me, there's never a perfect process. It's just the right process for the stage that you are at. So for example, at 25 people, practically speaking, you're still working to find product market fit to a certain extent. Your time horizons are quite short at that stage in terms of, everything from product delivery to the sales activity. Often at that stage, it makes sense to really orient around the next big deal, right, for an enterprise SaaS company. And then obviously for a venture-backed firm, you're very focused on the numbers, right? Sales growth and a variety of other things that are very dynamic and often very short term. And your team is small, right? You're in that size of company, you've got most likely less than 10 hands-on engineers. Maybe you've got a product person, right? Maybe the CEO is the product person driving the business. And often you're forging new ground, right? Every new customer is a learning experience for the entire organization. And so I think at that stage, your processes have to be very dynamic and very, in some cases, quite reactive, right? And your allocation of capital is a little bit more oriented around, well, let's get that next deal, right? Versus, hey, let's plan for where we need to be 2 years out. And so, at that stage, the processes are pretty fluid. I mean, of course, you're, managing tickets and you're trying to maintain a sprint schedule and working your way into a more structured process. But I think the reality is you just also have to have that capability and willingness to be quite dynamic at that stage. And then as we grew, so I would say practically speaking, if I think over the course of the 3 years, we went from 25 people to probably 50 and then 100 and then 200. We have, as we've grown and had success, we have started to have that capability to extend our timelines and our horizons a little bit. And, couple of things there, right? Even, every startup has, that initial piece of code that got everything going. And, if you need to kind of go back to that and, revisit that, right? And kind of rethink your architecture, in the context of, we've got great traction. Now let's always be thinking about what's the next version of our architecture and our product. And so about 2 years ago, we made that investment to really orient around what's the system architecture that's going to get us to 1,000 people and $1 billion valuation, and let's start making that investment. And we made a very conscious decision to invest capital in that area and to use that capital to be able to extend our horizons a little bit in terms of a really sustained project around the next version of the architecture for the platform. And we were quite successful in that effort. And then the other thing we did just a little bit after that was to say, look at the team and say, well, we've got, give or take, enough scale within the engineering organization to start to think about what's the process that we need to put into place now that's going to take us, say, from kind of 1 or 2 Scrum teams to 7, 8, 10 Scrum teams. What's the scalable process that we're going to pursue there? And that's where we did make a real investment in an agile approach. Obviously, people have a lot of different reactions to the word agile and what it means and so on. And I think it's another area where we just made a thoughtful investment. So we brought in industry experts. We really made it a bottoms-up effort with the team in terms of really providing some very strong training and also treating everything like an experiment so that we could really assess for ourselves as we implemented various components of an agile approach, which for us included Scrum teams and a particular way managing tickets and so on. But we really involved the entire engineering team in that effort and then product as well in that effort. And really with the goal of improving velocity and quality, right? And overall efficiency. And that was quite successful because we brought in really strong expertise from outside the organization. And we also created a partnership with every individual on the engineering team to really find the right path forward for our organization. And obviously every organization is a little bit different. The people are somewhat different and the product is somewhat different. And so that's been a really sustained effort over the past, I would say, the course of the last 18 months, where we did our initial training. We then made a number of decisions around the processes that we're going to follow. We started to ramp up and build out and expand our Scrum team, groups. We revisited throughout the course of the year. We then did another training, sustained week-long activity with the team to kind of revisit, like, what have we learned? What do we want to change? A strong refresh for all the people that we'd hired in the course of the prior year who hadn't gone through the initial training. So that's one part of it, is just the training and the partnership. And the other part of it is, I think, really just a constant reevaluation of what we're doing, what's working, what's not working, because often the wins are in the details, right? So you might say, well, what about, so for example, one of the things we're really focused on right now is QA and testing, and we've got some great automated, testing solutions and so on. But we're rethinking as we grow, how are we doing testing? Who is doing testing? Who's contributing to those automated tests and those test cases? And again, it's a joint effort, with kind of quality experts and our testing experts and hands-on software engineers and engineering leadership to just continually refine what we're doing. And, in all transparency, I look at it and I think, well, in a year or 2 years, I'm confident we won't be doing things exactly the way we're doing them today. And then, particularly as you might think about M&A activities or a variety of other kind of changes that occur in a growing organization, right? If you've acquired a company, how do you kind of manage that? Because that's a company with its own culture and its own engineering processes and so on. And, at some point you start to look at vendors for other very specialized technical capabilities, and how do you kind of roll that set of capabilities into the org as well?
I guess if you're looking back, like you mentioned, never a perfect process, but the right process for the stage you're at. How were you guys evaluating that? I mean, obviously, you're going through the different growth stages. They're not clean bars. Oh, we're at 50 people. This is when we're going to review process. Like, what was the litmus? Was it just, hey, it was reactive because you're growing so fast, and you really had to just react because you're dealing with a million other things, or were you guys actually thinking ahead, going, well, this is coming up. We need to maybe start putting this on the radar?
I'd say so, probably a little bit more the latter. In terms of my experience, it's my fourth startup. So I've been through the growth cycles a number of times. And it is a mix, right? For me, it's a combination of both, looking ahead. I think that's kind of critically important. Not having all the details necessarily, but being able to look ahead and say, what do we want in high level, the organization and our execution and delivery processes to look like when we're twice the size that we are today? And to be able to kind of hold that vision, and again, at a high level, not in the specifics. And then to kind of take that back on the day-to-day and, assess, right, current performance of the organization as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of identify what's the next component of this, right? Is it the architecture side? Is it the training side? Is it, what are the metrics that we want to be looking at and attacking today, right? But with this long-term vision in mind. And so I think the combination of those two has been really helpful, because I think 100% reactive without that long-term vision just results in a lot of thrashing, right? And kind of like idea of the day. On the other hand, focusing exclusively on kind of the long-term vision and just a checklist of things to get done, can lead you to, be focused on the wrong things in the moment, if you know what I mean. Because you always want to be, investing in those areas where you're going to have the most return.
I think a lot of times you hear that, especially with the rapid pace that you guys have been experiencing. I guess, on the flip side, you mentioned, obviously all hands on deck, get product out. And I had a guest on previously, but talked about, sales growth and the pressures that puts on the engineering team to deliver, to just ship product and get customers in. And then at some point, there's a transition to, hey, we need to move away from being reactive to sales needs to now a product focused, product management focused, driven engineering team. Have you guys seen that switch over where, it's like, hey, somebody sold something, it's a little bit outside of our scope. We got to deliver it because obviously we want revenue and we're trying to grow our customer base. And then now it's, we need to start thinking about the product because obviously there's just more customers.
I'll share a couple of thoughts on that. And one of them, I think, really relates to the success that we've had kind of specifically at Well. And I would note that our CEO, who's the founder of the company, Dezwarek, has always been, I would say, very much focused on the long-term product vision. And I think that has been a huge benefit to the organization, because it's allowed us to kind of stay focused on delivering capabilities that are aligned with that product vision. And even in the very early days, to say no to some of those, say, product feature requests that might not be aligned with our product vision. But then in a different company, someone might have said, well, let's just do it anyway. And so I do think that's been a huge part of our success. To your point exactly, right? If you don't have that kind of long-term product vision in mind, and even in the early stages, you want to make decisions that are aligned with that long-term product vision. That can be very hard to do. And practically speaking, that really has to come from the CEO, particularly at the early stage. And so I think that's been a huge part of our success. The other thing I would note is that we have always, been very careful not to provide a SaaS solution, right? Not 40 different versions of our product, one for each customer. And so that was kind of an architecture and just an approach decision we made early on. And we've held to that very rigorously. And I think had we not, we probably, wouldn't be where we are today. that's another area where, that ability at the product level, at the architecture level, to hold and commit to a long-term vision and make decisions in the moment that are aligned with that long-term vision, but also, have some flexibility, right, to deliver, kind of what the market wants and to learn from the market as well. So it's a great question. I genuinely think it's been a huge part of our success is that discipline from the very early stages.
Absolutely. I guess when you're now looking, you want to expand. I'm sure you mentioned, 400, get to 800, get to 1,000. And now that maybe your time horizon's changed, is that giving you the opportunity to do more forward thinking and forward planning than obviously, I mean, I'm sure before at 30, it's all hands on deck. But at this point, how much time are you spending on anticipating that growth and kind of just being able to at least have a plan in place?
I think our time horizons are longer that's how I think of it. And that, early days, we might be looking, a couple of months ahead, in all transparency. And I think, now we're looking probably 12 to 18 months ahead. So, still holding that long-term, 5 to 10-year vision, but a little bit more in the day-to-day, less about decisions that are going to impact the next month or two and more about decisions that are going to impact the next 6, 12, 18 months. So I think the distribution of effort, is probably the same. It's just that the time horizons for those decisions and that work are just longer, and that we're, really focused right now on, kind of Q1, Q2, Q3 of next year in terms of allocation of capital and some of those other decisions. And we've just got a great team who is really just executing very well on, what are we going to deliver this quarter? What are we going to deliver next quarter? And I should mention, we've, as part of, I think, one of your earlier questions, we've really built up a very strong product organization as part of this, really just in the course of last year, which is another organizational decision around how do we prepare for the next few years of growth and really bringing in, strong product leaders has been a key part of that activity. And I think one of the things that's let us, take a step back and look a little further ahead because we have such a strong product organization at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a big, having the CEO be product focused has been a huge advantage in kind of keeping that, the eye on that component where I think a lot of times when maybe a startup doesn't have that, a lot of the focus is external sales pressures to kind of grow the products. That's really interesting to hear that. And I'm sure as you guys are growing, you're going to be kept plenty busy. It sounds like you already have some things already in mind. And it seems like an exciting time at Well.
It is, in all transparency, sometimes when I because obviously we're hiring and we talk to a lot of candidates and a lot of external team members. We actually just had our kind of quarterly board meeting this week. And I think one of the things I'm really grateful for is we are in a really strong position at the moment. And when we kind of tell the story to candidates or share some of our metrics with investors and others, we've just really been executing well. We've had great market acceptance. I think in general, people have just been, really love the story. And once they dig into the numbers of the business and the opportunity that we have, it's somewhat unusual. And I'm just really grateful to be part of it. I think we have an amazing team here that has really succeeded in the market. And even looking at the success of the last few years, where I think, well, we're a successful startup. I do think our best years are ahead of us, given the opportunity in the healthcare space and just the value that we provide in terms of actually delivering, an improved patient experience, to tens of millions of patients across the U.S. So I'm really grateful to be, to be involved in it and be able to work with, all the people we have on the team.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you being on. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. If someone does want to reach out to you, kind of continue the conversation, is LinkedIn a good place to connect with you or any preferred avenues?
LinkedIn is great. It's got a little bit more detail on my background and always happy to connect with people and share our story and happy, for anyone that's just interested in what's really worked for us and maybe some things that didn't work. Always happy to chat and share some of those insights and learnings.
Awesome. We'll include your LinkedIn in the show notes. And hey, thanks for being on again. I appreciate it. And that's it for this episode. We'll be back again with different guests, different topic. I always ask for two things. One, if you find the podcast interesting, share it. That's how it's been growing kind of organically. So thank you for those that do share it. Appreciate that. And secondly, if you want me to find a specific guest for a specific topic you have in mind, hit me up on LinkedIn and let me know. And hopefully I'll do my best to find that. Until next time, thanks.